Hey, Low Code Approach listeners, this is Wendy Haddad. Before we jump into this week's episode, I wanted to let you know that we are starting to plan for the next season, and we want to make sure we hear from you on what is most important and relevant in terms of the topics that we'll be choosing. So if you could open a web browser and pop over to aka.ms/low code topic request, that's aka.ms/low code topic request, all one word. Fill out that brief survey on what topics and what subjects, what guests you might want to hear from. And who knows, maybe it'll make it into the next season of the podcast. Thanks so much and happy listening.
Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of the Low Code Approach. I'm Sean Feeney, a Senior Product Marketing Manager on the Power Platform team, and I'm joined by...
And I'm Jocelyn, expert in all things that are constituted as real pizza and Power Platform Dataverse security. And I'm here with Ken.
Yes, and I am Ken Aguilar, Principal Program Manager here on the Power Platform. Wendy is not with us today as she is attending a Napoleon conference right now, but she will be back with us shortly.
Oh my God. I really appreciate that. But guess what? We have a very special guest with us today. We've got Mik Ferland, Principal Product Manager on the Power Platform team, joining with us to talk about, well, environments and environment strategy. And so this is after Ignite, and we just had a ton of news go out with all the updates to the Power Platform Admin Center. And a key portion of that are all the new management capabilities. And so we brought Mik on to talk about, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for organizations that already have an environment strategy, and what are the new things they can do, and is this a rip and replace, or what's actually happening? So Mik, we've got lots of questions for you. I hope you got lots of answers. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's great to be here. I hope I have the answers to all your questions.
Sweet. Well, let's start with the first thing. What are some of those new managed capabilities that were shown off at Ignite?
For sure. There's a few of them. Can keep me honest if there's some that you want me to mention or double click on. There's one which is the environment groups that has been GA'd since May of this year. And we started out with a list of 6 rules of 6 things that you can apply across environments in bulk. And we're expanding that to many of the environment settings. So what that means is you can now apply all sorts of environment settings that have to do with agents and copilots and a lot more to many environments in bulk, have those locked down so that central IT team can dictate what values those should be, and make sure that the system administrators at the lower level aren't necessarily able to override that. So that is one of the things, significantly increasing sort of the initial list of settings and policies that you can apply at scale.
That's super awesome. I love to hear all about the granularity that you could have, as well as how scalable everything is. But being able to apply control is one thing. Tell me, is there more things that are coming in the realm of visibility?
Yeah, there should be a few things. So this one is probably going to be more towards the beginning of next year when we talk about visibility. But we are building a new inventory experience that is going to bring together all of the resources and everything that's being created in the Power Platform. Typically, it's a pretty sprawling estate, right? From the perspective of IT, it's quite difficult to always keep track of what's going on, who's building what where. And we are building an inventory experience that's going to bring all of that together. And it's going to be very easy to find whatever you're looking for, whether it's some agent that someone has maybe created in an environment they're not supposed to, or even just being able to identify things in regions that are non-compliant. There is going to be a pretty big breadth of things that you'll be able to query for. So that's definitely going to be one thing that's going to be helpful, because today we acknowledge that a lot of that data is scattered across the admin center, right? It could be sort of scattered between products. You don't always have the view across environments. So we're going to solve all of those challenges and give IT that central visibility that has been much needed. I would say we should have had this long ago, but we're finally catching up, and it will be a capability that people can rely on. Yes.
So Mik, I've got maybe 2 questions here. The first is going to be, how do I get access to my data? Question that a customer might ask you is, can you export the inventory data?
It's a good question. For the first release, what we're going to have, it's going to be no, but there's no good reason for it to be no. So we obviously will provide that capability within the inventory experience itself. But there is always the data export that exists today. The data that we have could also be exported through that pipeline. So you can kind of think of it as two routes. If you want to go just straight to the admin center itself, we'll have the native out-of-box experience, right, for you to sort of search across your inventory. And if you want to start building some custom tools or even more advanced dashboard capabilities on top of that same data, then pivoting to the data export is always an option for customers. Today, we don't even have that sort of out-of-box native experience, so that's where the addition is going to come in.
That'd be one of my other questions is, what do I do with the COE now? Because the COE had inventory service. So what do I do with the COE?
Yes. So good question about the COE. So the COE is technically not going anywhere, right? Like that is something which exists today. But for context to people listening, a lot of us are in the Power Platform scale team. So what that means is that we build features for the biggest customers of the Power Platform that have the biggest usage. And the challenge that we see with this COE sometimes when you reach a certain volume is that it could frankly be a little slow, not as reliable as what large customers with large adoption would expect. So what we typically do, and this is a pattern that I'm sure customers have noticed in the past few years, is that things that work the best and customers love the most from the COE, we just try to bring them over natively to the product over time. So this is one of them where there's a lot of inventory views in the COE that customers really like. And we are definitely bringing some of those to the admin center. The first release will solve a few of those. It's not going to necessarily cover everything that's in the COE already, but over time, we'll seek to kind of fill in that gap.
All right. And now for the burning question.
Yes.
Is this part of managed environments?
So I have good news. So for the core inventory, the answer is no. So anybody is going to be able to go to the admin center, view that inventory experience, and you'll be able to see it for all the resources across any environments, whether it's a production environment that's not managed, an environment that doesn't have Dataverse but has some flow in it. So really the full breadth, everything is going to be captured and exposed.
So Mik, all right, you mentioned data export, but word on the street is that there's a new version coming out. And I think our other guest host can tell us more information. Jocelyn, tell me more about this. What are we expecting here?
Indeed, there is a V2 that is coming out. It's currently in private preview, but you are able to sign up to try. This new version of data export allows you to bulk export your tenant data for various different types of resources. And we are working on adding more besides just apps and flows, but it has this new really awesome seamless experience by leveraging Fabric shortcuts. So we're really excited for that.
Nice. Very cool. Let's get back to the updated Power Platform Admin Center. And Ken, please tag in on this one too. Why? Why did we change the look and feel of this? It's a new experience for our admins, and I kind of want to know what led us in this direction.
So, when I talk, this is a specific scenario I'm going to mention, but I think is representative of the challenge we've had with the old admin center, if I can already label it as such. So when I talked about the inventory being scattered across the admin center, like just for that scenario, if you want to know what Canvas app inventory you have or flow inventory, like you typically have to go to many places. But even that small scenario is quite representative of the admin center today, like in its current state, where there are a lot of tasks and things that you need to do as IT that require you to navigate through many different pages. Things are tucked away behind sort of the third layer after clicking through 3 times. Sometimes you have to navigate to different places. Sometimes it's even difficult to even know where to go to begin with. There is just this general sense that there was an opportunity for us to think about what are the most important things that IT need to do when they go to the admin center, and how can we make those core, as we call it, internally jobs to be done or scenarios that IT need to do. Let's make those really as seamless as possible. And how do we adapt the information architecture of the admin center to essentially make all of those scenarios as easy as possible and just more easy to navigate across the board?
The admin center now, I guess we could say, is a lot more opinionated and completely revamped. If you think about how the Mac or the Microsoft Admin Center originally looked, for those of you who might remember that, it was pure chaos. Even Power Platform Admin Center before, I forgot how many different portals we actually had. But you had Power Platform, you had the Dynamics portal, you had the just jumping all over the place. So having things in a very central location is to the benefit of both the customer and to us. Plus, I think the green looks better than the purple.
Well, so let me piggyback on that. Like, we got this awesome new experience in the quote unquote green Power Platform Admin Center. And there's a whole bunch of new functionality in there, kind of in more opinionated hub like experiences. But I know there's some other news that just came out. Ken, I'm going to tap you on the shoulder for this one about who can actually go and like experience all these awesome managed environments features now, where maybe there were roadblocks before that prevented them from getting in and using it. Can you speak on maybe that latest announcement?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. That's a great question. So in the past, there were 3 admin roles that could administer Power Platform Admin Center: Global Admin, Power Platform Admin, and Dynamics. Now, of course, your makers could still access or can still access the Power Platform Admin Center, but they can only see what they have access to. What we've heard from customers is that they want sort of a bit of that same functionality, but a hybrid of the two, whereby they could delegate, if you will, some of the administrative functions over to particular business units or different individuals and so on. So in the near future, what we will be doing is introducing capabilities to allow administrators to delegate those administrative responsibilities.
And can I add an example just to add some color to what you said and tying it to the environment strategy that we talked about? So, thinking about the environment groups, the idea here would be that, let's say, Ken, as the primary IT guy in the company, right, can set up a general configuration of environment groups. And okay, there's maybe one for, let's say, the finance department. The environments in that group need to be set up with these kind of settings, these kind of policies. But typically, you don't necessarily have to configure everything, right? So you can delegate that finance group to somebody else, like let's say Sean. And Sean, from that point forward, you can take care of like the other management of the environments in that group. So the general theme, to add on to what Ken said, is we're trying to get to a world where we're like decentralizing governance, right? So instead of always relying on the same 1, 2, 3 people in the company to have to do everything, how can we empower people, at least the core IT team that will still be there, to set up the primary most important things, like making sure that, there's a baseline of security and governance that the environments have. But then for the rest of the administrative tasks and, dare I say burden, right, that could be sort of offloaded and delegated to somebody else.
Awesome. Thank you, Mick. But I think there's something else I want to get into, and it's something that I know is near and dear to Ken's heart and kind of extends on additional usage of managed environments. And that's going to be organizations that may have had to come into compliance with utilizing managed environments due to licensing. And I know we just made a big announcement on that. Ken, I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about that one.
You're going to put me on the spot for that one.
Heck yeah, buddy. Write that blog post.
All right. Well, Sean, thanks for putting me in the hot seat. I really appreciate that very much. My ears are getting warm right now. So everybody loves talking about licensing. So I guess we're going to take the rest of the podcast and do that. So let's focus on that.
Phil Topmiss came in and asked that question, by the way.
Thank you very much, Phil. Appreciate it. Next time we're on one of your podcasts, I'm going to ask some questions that will make you uncomfortable. Anyway, so what we've heard from customers is, hey, we love managed environments, but realistically, for our organization at this time, we are not financially capable to invest all in on apps and automate. We have to choose one or the other. And that's maybe sort of the basic core of the problem. After listening to customers and really taking some time to consider all the options, including Mick, remember we were talking about re-architecting and breaking things all out by individual features, which would have been a nightmare and incredibly difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
We chose to go the very simple route, and that is change how compliance is understood and works within the platform. And what that means is that we change the and statement to an or, meaning that now within Power Platform, you can use Power Apps or Power Automate premium licenses to cover your managed environments usage. Now, Ken, what does that mean? Okay, so if I'm a customer and I have approximately, I don't know, let's just say 1,000 licenses right now, and I now want to enable managed environments. for all my environments because I have 1,000 licenses and I have 1,000 users. Great, I can do that. I can turn that on across all my different environments, and I no longer need to have additional licenses, provided that I am enabling managed environments inside of Power Apps and I am not using premium standalone flows. So that Power Platform premium app license will cover managed environments for premium apps, flows that are seated within the premium apps, and standard flow usage. Okay, well, what about the inverse? So the inverse is also true. We will cover for if you're very heavy on Power Automate and going the other direction. The key thing to remember is that the premium functionality within each license is what you're actually going to be paying for. Meaning that if you're using premium connectors, then you're going to still have to pay for a license or acquire a license. How's that, Sean?
I think it was really good. I think this is going to be one of the maybe the one times we don't talk about a technical topic, but we still need visuals.
Yeah.
So luckily enough, there will be a blog post, and we're going to have a link in our show notes for you that will go a little bit more in depth in what we're talking about with some visuals to give you guys an idea of the new licensing changes. Hey, Jocelyn, what's on your mind?
I wanted to dig a little deeper into how opinionated the new PPAC is. Can you tell me more? Like, how is this going to really tell me what is on PPAC's mind and what I should be doing better as an admin?
So going back to, I think Ken highlighted the key word here, which is opinionated, right? And when we look at the previous iteration of the admin center, I mean, for lack of a better description, it had no opinion, right? So we would expose a lot of data, a lot of reports, all sorts of settings. Internally, we refer to the environment settings as the wall of settings, right? Because there's hundreds of them, not organized in any specific, I mean, there is a categorization, but none that really helps admins understand which ones should they actually turn on or off and configure. So the key theme over here is as we look at the different sections that the admin center has, whether it's security, monitoring for operational health, and all of the different large sections, the idea is to really bubble up and actually give you some active recommendations on like what needs to be done as you drop into each one of those pages. So recommendations are a thing that we've introduced for some time now, right? They do exist in some facets of the admin center, but that philosophy of being able to distill what you need to do as an admin as you drop into those different contexts. So the security context, the monitoring context, that's going to be one thing that's front and center. Speaking of security, I don't know if there's a podcast on that new security page, so I don't want to take some of the flair from whoever is going to speak to it at some point, but we're even going as far to calculate what we're calling a score, like a security score. And just the philosophy behind that is to help you get a sense of, what is your overall posture looking like? Are there certain things that you still need to go do? Is everything green, right? And things are looking good. So I would say that the theme of having the recommendations, the scoring is something that's going to just permeate all across the admin center, and not just the admin center, even in some of the maker experiences. So there are those portal specific recommendations and tooling that are coming in the pipeline as well.
I love that. I love the recommendations so much. I feel like it's as if I walked into a pizza restaurant and the chef was going to tell me specifically what customized toppings he thought was best, but it's actually just settings from our organization. I love it. I really do.
Mm-mm. And these will get better over time. That's one thing I want to emphasize, right? Is, that the algorithm, if I can say it that way, that computes those recommendations, we can really do interesting things with them over time. And what I'm going to describe is not how it works for Ignite. So I just want to disclaim this, but we can think about interesting scenarios where maybe even like thinking, hey, like organizations in your kind of industry typically do this, right? Maybe you should too, right? And so like even these kind of like recommendations based on industry profile and the kind of usage you get in the Power Platform, like these are all data points that could eventually also fuel those recommendations. So as you start seeing those in the admin center and even the score, we can only become kind of smarter about how we bubble those over time.
So thank you for that, Mik. We've got these changes, these updates to how Power Platform Admin Center works and how admins should be approaching it. How does that change how admins work within, other admins? Say there's, I don't know, 5 admins that work across Power Platform for like in Microsoft, right? And we had Leanne on. We've got a number of admins that are doing that. So like say they're documenting their operations. Do they have to go back and just like update all their content because there's new ways to approach how you work with Admin Center, and you've got to update images and you got to talk about like a day in the life of an admin, or maybe you've done like admin in a day training for your organization. Any tips or best practices for those organizations that may have to update their content based on this strategy, like a way that they should be thinking about it with this new opinionated layout?
I'll partially answer the question if I can. So what I would say is there is going to be a learning curve, right? There's no doubt about it. But what I would say is if we did our job well, it should be much more obvious what you need to do in the admin center. So I would argue that these kind of learning content and admin of the day was even more needed in the past when doing a simple task of, hey, how do I secure my Canvas app requires you to go to 10 different places. So for that kind of stuff, you do need the learning content because the product itself is not inherently intuitive. But when Ken talks about things being more opinionated and better organized and streamlined so that the primary tasks and things you need to do as an admin are super easily achievable in an intuitive way, that should be hopefully a little bit less needed. For whoever is listening, please keep us accountable, right? We are making this change, assuming that it's for the better and it's going to be more intuitive and there isn't as much of a need to read through public documentation and watch YouTube videos to get a sense and navigate around the admin center.
Just to kind of reinforce what Mik said, if you compare the previous version of the admin center and what we have now, things are just blatantly obvious, or as Spock would say, logical. For example, if I want to manage the platform, there's a manage section. If I want to look at things that are related to security, there's a security section. If I wanted to look at performance, there is a section where you can monitor performance. Again, it's blatantly obvious. I think that the learning curve that, Mik spoke of is going to be extremely low. Now, that said, the platform does move very, very fast, and we've said this over and over again. Please refresh your knowledge and look at the platform at least once a quarter. And if you need to, adjust your strategy, your thinking, and so on. Before we get to the end of the podcast, because I know we're getting pretty close, Mik, I'm curious, what type of rules do we have now? Because we have rules, but what additional rules have we added?
I will gladly answer that. Took a lot of work since the first release in the month of May when we got generally available, both the routing and the groups. For folks listening, Ken and I worked a lot on both those features, so we go way back. So a lot of the new rules, there is such a big emphasis on co-pilots and agents. So obviously there is going to be a set of those that are going to help IT govern those agents and co-pilots in the same fashion that they expect to be able to do that for Canvas apps and Power Automate. So for those that were at the Power Platform conference, or even for those that weren't there, you might have noticed a theme that we are trying to bring a lot of the existing governance capabilities that worked quite well for those other products and just simply bringing them to co-pilots and agents. So just to mention one of them is the sharing limits, right? So that one is going to be, I know mentioning dates is a little bit risky, but either in December or January, folks should be able to see that show up as a rule at some point. So definitely co-pilot agents is one of them, but even some of the, I don't know how to call them, not like traditional environment settings, but they've been there for some time, right? So for example, dictating whether PCF components are allowed or not at a Canvas app, right?
Wait, hold on. What's a PCF component?
Yes. So it's the Power Apps Component Framework, if I'm not mistaken. So what that just means is you're able to add custom controls in your Canvas apps. And the reason why IT typically cares about that is if you're injecting that kind of custom code, maybe it could be some custom thing that is not approved by your company. Maybe it could have some malicious stuff. So even in our public docs for that capability, we do always warn the customer that just be careful about what you're actually putting in the application. There is a setting for that, right? So for example, if you have a set of personal developer environments that you've created for your users so that they can just experiment with the platform, test things out, maybe in that use case, having something more advanced like the custom control is not needed. So now you can allow or deny that at scale with the environment groups. there's a lot of these kind of settings that historically IT has always cared about, which is going to be there. So Power Apps component framework is going to be there. To go back to the agents and copilots, I'm sure folks listening are also trying to catch up with all of the settings that are being introduced to govern those. So those are also, some of them, going to be available within the environment group's rules. So even being able to allow or deny whether Copilot preview features are available for makers and Power Apps, that's something that exists today at the environment level. We're bringing it to the environment group too.
So, Mick, I was going to ask a question about, hey, what's your favorite new rule, or what's going to be next on the roadmap? But I've got a different question. So, I'm a customer, and I've built all kinds of, let's call it IT glue on connectors and so on. But now I want to change over and I want to start using APIs. Are the things that you mentioned accessible via the API?
Yep. So for those that don't know it yet, we have one thing called the Power Platform for Admins V2 connector. So we have a V1, but I'm talking specifically about the V2. That V2 connector is exposing the actions that you can also get by interacting with the API directly. But effectively, the management of the platform is something that natively we want it to be API first from the beginning. And just like we talked about having an opinionated admin center, right? And that being an area of improvement that we went after. The mentality of being API first, I think, is another area where we're doing improvements on. And we're doing it because, going back, like, a lot of us are in the scale team, right? And a lot of the big companies, as much as we want things to be intuitive and streamlined in the admin center, the reality on the ground is that a lot of folks still prefer to use APIs for a lot of different reasons, and those are valid reasons. So we want to make sure that there is an equivalent, so that what you can do in the admin center is also something that you can do via API in any event where you need to do something custom or extend what the platform does out of the box.
What we'll do is we'll include a link to the Ryan Jones and Sean Nandy breakout session at Ignite that kind of went over this, and it should have some screenshots for you of kind of like what that new green Power Platform Admin Center experience is, and kind of breaks it down into the 3 pillars, if you will, of essentially, management, of governance and security and operational tasks alike. And so we'll kind of land that framework there. Now on to probably the most important question of this entire podcast episode. Nick, Chicago pizza, deep dish, or New York style pizza, what are you going to choose and why?
So I have to choose New York. You know why?
Why? Please do indulge.
I've never even had Chicago deep dish.
That's okay, man. It's all right. You chose her.
So I've never even been to Chicago. So for folks on the call, I'm from Canada. I'm based in Montreal, Canada. I've been to plenty of cities in the States. I haven't been to Chicago. And yeah, so for that reason, I have to put my money on the New York style. And I will say, based on the characteristics that I know of, New York style seems to be more aligned with what I would like, because it's probably similar to Neapolitan. But hey, next Ignite, if it's still in Chicago, I'll make it there and I'll try it out. I don't know. What about you, Sean and Ken? Is that I know Jocelyn's pick already. I'm curious about you too.
I have zero preference. And the reason why I say zero preference is just to poke fun at Jocelyn.
Poke fun at Jocelyn. For those of you guys on the call who haven't met Sean, he has a pizza tattoo on him, and that pizza is distinctly a New York style pizza.
Yeah, I'm hardcore in that camp. I'm about that life. Hey, Mick, thank you so much for joining us and not only teaching us about security and governance and the updated PPAC or Power Platform Admin Center experience, but also the hot takes on pizza. So we hope everybody enjoys all the updates to Power Platform Admin Center. Both Ken and Mick are always available for your feedback on it and how to improve that experience. You're welcome.
There are emails.
We put the email in the description, or
And cell phone number.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us, Mick. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you guys again.